Yes, Gavin Newsom can rig elections, but he can't rebuild Los Angeles. We're still waiting for that. He can spend $300 million of our money on his own personal presidential ambitions, but he can't spend it on dealing with homelessness effectively or the mental health crisis. None of this that Gavin Newsom has been focused on will help a single person in California. Hello everyone, welcome to the Steve Hilton Show, special edition of the show today, reflecting on last night's election results. I'm taping this on Wednesday morning. Tuesday was election day, of course, across the country. We had big elections in New York, New Jersey, Virginia, and right here in California on Proposition 50. I'm going to get into all of that. We've got some California news coming up with Susan Shelley and an interview with someone you'll find really interesting. She's been a great champion for the cause of girls' sports in California. She's now running for the state legislature, and she has an amazing story about one of the incidents that really shone a spotlight on the outrageous issue that we talk about often, which is the way that biological boys have been allowed to not just compete in girls' sports, but invade girls' spaces. So that is all coming up. But let's get into the results last night. You may have seen me commenting on TV, and I will just share with you what I feel about all of these results. I'm going to start in California because obviously that's my focus running for governor here. Proposition 50, Gavin Newsom's unconstitutional scheme to rig our elections and to silence and disenfranchise millions of voters and voices here in California. It has passed comfortably, still about 25% of the votes to be counted, but it's very clear that it's going to pass. And I think it's really important to note two things about this. Of course, Gavin Newsom and the Democrats are out celebrating this great victory. They wanted to stick it to Trump, and that's what they appear, in their view, to have done. Remember, that was the whole point of this. The whole reason that Gavin Newsom put this whole thing together was to stick it to Trump, in his words. And he said it again last night in his speech in Sacramento, to end the Trump presidency. That's the phrase he used. By the way, how ironic that is from these people who never stop lecturing us about how they're saving democracy. He's talking openly about ending the Trump presidency, which was just voted on by the majority of American voters. President Trump won the popular vote. And now Gavin Newsom has taken it upon himself to end this presidency halfway through because his plan is to, this is now executed, the first part of it, to take another 5 seats from the Republicans for the Democrats so they can flip the House in the midterms, impeach President Trump, and in his words, end the Trump presidency. But I think they're celebrating too soon for 2 reasons. Number one, the national reason. What's actually happened as a result of what Gavin Newsom did here was a whole new wave of redistricting efforts in Republican states that wouldn't have happened if Gavin Newsom hadn't done this in California. Newsom called his ballot initiative the Election Rigging Response Act. He claimed it was responding to Texas. But now you've got states all across the country responding to Gavin Newsom. So it looks very much as if the net effect, once everything is done before the midterms next year, of Gavin Newsom's scheme here in California, which basically was a corrupt contribution to his presidential campaign, $300 million of taxpayer money spent on this. Then what's the outcome? That Republicans will end up with more seats in the House and actually hold on to their control of the House of Representatives. And it will have been Gavin Newsom who made that possible. So I think he's celebrating a little too soon on that front nationally. But from the California perspective, I think he's celebrating too soon, because it seems to me very clear, even from the responses I was getting last night, and certainly this is how I feel about it as a candidate now running for governor next year. A year from now, I will be speaking to you, I hope, as the governor-elect of California. That's the plan. And how I see it is this. We are sick and tired now. We saw it last night, of this corrupt Democrat machine. Look at how all the different pieces of the Democrat industrial complex, the Democrat machine, just fell into line behind this. day after day at the beginning of the campaign on Prop 50, you saw announcements, one union after another, $5 million, $7 million, $10 million, all behind this scheme. Most of it government unions, which means it's in the end taxpayer money, our money, that's paying for that. They're all lined up. This corrupt machine that's been running this state 15 years now of one-party rule. Next year, it will be 16 years of one-party rule. And I think people are sick of it. And the fact that it was so brazen that they just went in there and just ripped up the state constitution and drew these maps in secret and practically silenced Republican voters' voices in California just for their national political ambitions. It's disgusting. It's disgusting. Yes, Gavin Newsom can rig elections, but he can't rebuild Los Angeles. We're still waiting for that. He can spend $300 million of our money on his own personal presidential ambitions, but he can't spend it on dealing with homelessness effectively or the mental health crisis that he promised to fix or anything else. None of this that Gavin Newsom has been focused on the last few months, none of it will help a single person in California. None of it will help clean up the mess that he made in California. And I think as this next year unfolds, and we focus in the campaign next year on California, whereas this election we've just had on Prop 50 was basically a national election. It was some kind of referendum on some national combination of the shutdown and Republicans and President Trump and all of that. That's not going to be the case next year in California. Next year, it will be a referendum on 16 years of one-party rule by the Democrats that have given us the worst results of any state in the country. You know the list by now. The highest gas prices, the highest electric bills, the highest poverty rate, the highest unemployment rate, crime, homelessness, the schools are a disaster, the business climate, the worst in America. Every single thing, housing costs, the highest in the country. Everything has been a failure. A majority of Californians know that it's time for change. A majority say that we're on the wrong track. So I think that this result last night, once it settles down and people reflect on it, I think it's actually going to fire us up to win next year in California. So I think they really are celebrating too soon. Then let's look at the results across the country. Obviously not so involved in any of those personally. And it's a disappointment, I have to tell you. I thought that Jack Ciattarelli in New Jersey was going to pull off a victory there. The margin was much bigger for the Democrats than I even anticipated, or even that the polls showed. I don't know what happened there. I don't know what happened in Virginia. But New York is the one that I think is so instructive. Of course, it was predicted that Mamdani would win in New York, but I was really shocked to watch his victory speech last night. There was not the slightest attempt to bring people together. He didn't win some massive landslide. It was just around 50%. Half of New York voted against him. He made no attempt to reach out to those people. It was an angry, hateful, divisive speech, highly partisan, not even partisan in terms of Democrat versus Republican, factional, because it was about his narrow slice of the Democratic Party, which has now really become the dominant part of the party. There's no question now that the energy in the Democrats is on the far left, And if he goes ahead and implements the agenda that he talked about last night without compromise, you're going to see, because it's been tried everywhere else before. I mean, as I've said many times, Mamdani talks about state-run grocery stores. I know what that's like. We had state-run grocery stores in communist Hungary. I've been to state-run grocery stores. It's an absolute disaster, as it is anywhere where they try and expand government to the proportions that Mamdani is talking about. So if he goes ahead with that agenda, it's another reason, I think, that next year, here in California and elsewhere in the country, when the Democrats run and talk about all their plans to make life more affordable, as we're going to see here in California, it's the same set of issues, actually. When you see Mamdani talking about affordability and how it's going to help fix affordability, of course, in California, that's even more so. We're 50th out of 50 states on affordability. It's worse even than New York. But what we're going to have here in California, because I'm going to be the candidate, is a real debate about what caused prices and costs to be so high in states like New York and California. And here's a hint: they're both run by Democrats. The reason everything is so expensive in states run by Democrats and more affordable in states run by Republicans is that this massive expansion of government power and control, the regulations, the taxes, all the things that now Mamdani wants to do in New York, that's what drives up the cost of everything. The climate policies they're obsessed with, the endless regulations on business, the tax increases, that is what makes things expensive. The bigger you grow government, the more expensive things get. And so he's going to be testing that idea to destruction in the year ahead. So that's going to give us further ammunition in California to say that we need to go in a different direction, in a direction towards actually reducing this massive, bloated, nanny state government bureaucracy that we have here in California. Mamdani seems to want to expand in New York. So when I think about these results, of course it's true that for individual candidates who fought so hard, like Jack Ciattarelli, and they didn't make it, it's a massive disappointment. Of course that's true. And of course it's true that here in California, it's truly sad and outrageous that so many millions of people will have their voices silenced, will be effectively disenfranchised across our state when they're not properly represented in Congress. If this power grab goes through in the 5 seats that the Democrats have stolen, that they actually win them in the election next year, that is sad. But in the end, I'm optimistic, because I just think in the seeds of what can only be described as a disappointing night for Republicans, there you have the seeds of a really successful night next year, this time next year, especially here in California. And that's what I'll be fighting for. Susan, great to see you. There's a whole bunch of stories. I think you can file them all under the heading of Democrat financial shenanigans, basically, of various kinds.
Yes.
But the first one is a story that I've seen, and I haven't really dug into. So I'm very happy that you're here to tell us all about it. This is about the state retirees fund, Calpers, and some ridiculous loss on an investment.
Yes. Calpers decided that because they were underfunded, this was several years ago, that they would do private equity instead of equity that was out in the markets where it was transparent. They would do private equity, and they would make more money with all these experts who were advising them on private equity. And then they said they're going to use a little more private equity. They increased the percentage once or twice. And now we get some transparency at last, even though the law prohibits transparency. Kenneth Schrupp, who is a great reporter with the Center Square, uncovered the fact that CalPERS lost 71% of its investment in a clean energy fund, a $468 million investment. They lost 71% of it, and they paid $22 million in fees for this wonderful advice to do this. You know, this is publicly funded if it doesn't keep up. The taxpayers are on the hook for these pensions. And so to have CalPERS lose money in private equity on these green energy investments, obviously what's happening is regular, ordinary commercial investors are not interested in throwing their money into these things. So who's going to invest in all this green energy tech? Why, the California-backed pension funds will invest in it. And so just as we lost $500 million on Solyndra of the federal tax money when President Obama put us into that, this is another one, a green energy fund that CalPERS invested in, private equity, and we don't know exactly how they lost it, but it's worth a lot less than what they put into it.
So and is there some story about a lack of transparency around it? They won't talk about it.
Yes, apparently there's very little transparency in private equity. It's not like you can open up Yahoo Finance and see what it's worth today. So it's a guesstimate as to what the value is at any given time because it's private equity. So I'm not an expert on how this works, but CalPERS isn't either because they've just lost 71% of their investment.
So were any rules broken here, or this was just bad judgment and politically driven investing?
politically driven investing for sure. And I don't think any laws were broken because they did get permission to do a larger percentage in private equity. But the trouble is they're chasing their returns with, good money after bad. The more risk they take to try to make up their losses, the worse it gets. And if they had just done something that was steady and boring and not politically involved the way other pension funds do, they would have had steady, boring, much better results. If they'd been in the S&P 500, they'd have been much better off.
So it's not just that they didn't get the gain they were expecting. The pension money of California public sector workers, that's what this is for, isn't it?
Right. And it's underfunded. So they're trying to, I guess we're trying to make it up. But really, I think what it's about is trying to support this political agenda of unrealistic technology for green energy, so that the governor can stand there and say, oh, it's working and it's funded, and look at all these great companies and the future is bright. And actually, the future is lights out because a lot of this stuff doesn't work.
What's the connection between the governor and Calpers in terms of this, the Calpers investment decisions supporting the governor's political priorities?
Well, I think the Calpers board is appointed. Probably the governor has something to do with that. I'd have to look it up to be sure, but it's always very political. The governor has something to do with how big those pensions are when they negotiate all of these memoranda of understanding for the different union bargaining units. So it's all tied up in government and overseen by elected officials. So it's understood, I think, that this is the goal. And just the fact that they were trying to put money into a clean energy fund really tells you. Very often you'll see them refuse to invest in particular companies, fossil fuel companies or tobacco companies or whatever the villain of the week is in politics. Oh, well, we're divesting from that. And so they're divesting from things that are reliably producing income and growth, and then they're investing in things that are very risky, which is fine, but not with pension money. Pension money has to be invested very conservatively.
So what's the outcome here? Is there going to be any accountability?
Probably not. Probably not.
That's just California, isn't it?
It's just California, but it certainly is an important issue of whether the pensions are being well managed and whether politics is creating bad investment decisions. If the private market isn't investing in it, that's a signal that there's an issue with it, because everybody in the private markets wants to make money. So if the government investors with the tax dollars are investing in things that the market has rejected, that is a giant red light flashing. We also saw this with wind energy. There was something in a package of bills some time ago that said the CPUC would allow ratepayers to pay the cost of energy that was generated by offshore wind, no matter what it cost, because the problem was that investors were not providing enough support for these offshore wind projects. So California stepped in and said, well, we're going to guarantee that market. Well, what does that mean? That means the ratepayers are going to pay too much, and probably it's not going to go well.
It's all such a scam. All right, next one.
Next one, we have the billionaires tax, which has been introduced by a union, Service Employees International, one of the healthcare unions in SEIU. And they want a billionaires tax, and they want to put it on the ballot statewide for voter approval. This would be a 5% confiscation of the total wealth of billionaires who live in California. It's an estimated 150 to 200 people, and it would be just taking their wealth one time, supposedly 5% of everything they have in the world, not just in California, and they would just have to pay that. And then SEIU wants 90% to go to themselves, the healthcare system, and 10% to go to education, probably to try to buy off the teachers. But actually, this is kind of a bad idea because, well, obviously it's a bad idea. The billionaires who are paying these high taxes in California, and our income tax system is very progressive, meaning the highest rates on the highest incomes. So if they leave and they move to Texas, you'll get your 5% one time, but forever after, they'll be paying zero income tax in Florida, zero income tax in Texas. And then what happens? to the California budget, to the general fund revenue from income tax. It's going to plummet if these high earners leave. And of course, once you break the seal on a wealth tax, which is what this is, there's really nothing to stop the next step from being, we need to tax wealth across the economy. We need to tax home equity. We need to tax 401ks. Well, we'll start with millionaires, but it comes down year after year as it doesn't produce enough money. It comes down to lower and lower incomes. The idea of taxing wealth is something we should not pursue in California.
I mean, this is what, when people say, well, who cares if the rich leave or whatever? Well, they're the ones that create the jobs. And right now we need that because we have the highest unemployment rate in the country. So this
Yes,
is just going to make that worse, and the highest poverty rate.
right.
So, like that classic phrase, you don't make the poor richer by making the rich poorer. That's just not how it works. Um, and so we want to be a place that's welcoming to the people who are going to create jobs and wealth and opportunity for everybody, including themselves. That's how it works. But this is a classic left wing. I mean, I remember this wealth tax. This has been around. I mean, I remember the teacher unions in LA when they were talking about their conditions for reopening LA after the pandemic. Literally on the list was a wealth tax. So the unions, this is their constant go-to. What exactly would the money be spent on?
Well, it would shore up the healthcare system in California, which is being bled dry by excessive enrollment in the safety net programs. Medi-Cal is a safety net program, and 1/3 of the state of California is currently on it. I think it's 15 million. 13 to 15 million, I think, is the last number I saw of how many people are on full scope Medi-Cal. And that is unsustainable. And one thing that's going wrong with that is that when you open enrollment to more and more people, you have fewer and fewer doctors relative to the number of patients who are on the system. You're not providing care, you're providing insurance for care. And go ahead, take a number and wait for a specialist, wait for a doctor, wait for a dentist, because there are too many people on the program. I think it was very reckless for California's legislature and the governor to expand full scope Medi-Cal, not emergency Medi-Cal, as other states have, full insurance, specialists, prescriptions, dentists, everything, long-term care even. They expanded that to the entire undocumented population of California, all ages. It's an entitlement. They have no idea what it's going to cost because everyone who is here, who qualifies for it based on low income, which is just stated, you don't have to prove anything, it's just self-certified, they are eligible for it. They can have it. They can have whatever they need. It's an unlimited expense. So they said it would cost $3 billion. They budgeted $6 billion. It wound up costing $9 billion. They started borrowing money from other accounts to try and cover it into the Medi-Cal account. They're messing with the math somehow to take federal dollars and draw them down to cover some of it, which the Trump administration is going to put a stop to. And so for all these reasons, the people in the healthcare system want more money. And that's, I think, what this billionaires tax is telling us.
When you look at Medi-Cal and I've, there are certain parts of the state where it's much higher, nearly, I think there are certain parts where it's well over 40% of people on Medi-Cal, certain counties. I just want you to explain to us how that fits, because the left, their slogan for the longest time, Bernie, AOC, all that, adopted by many other Democrats, is Medicare for all. That's what they say, Medicare for all. But what actually seems to be happening is Medi-Cal for all. That's where we're moving.
Well, this started under Obamacare. I think it was 2013. There was an expanded population of people who were eligible for Medi-Cal through the Obamacare system, through the exchanges. So the number of people on Medi-Cal rose for that reason. And then they started adding the undocumented population. First it was children, then it was older people, now it's everybody. And they have millions of people enrolled in this system. And it isn't adequate to care for all the people who are on it. There was even a lawsuit from MALDEF, the Mexican American Legal Defense Fund, I think it is. They had a lawsuit going that there was inadequate care, lack of providers who would accept Medi-Cal patients. And why is that? Because the reimbursements are very low in California and your expenses are very high. So medical providers couldn't stay in business if they were providing care and losing money on each person they saw. Each appointment would lose money. So there's a limited number that becomes charity. That's a limited number that you can do in your practice. And so there were fewer and fewer doctors who would accept Medi-Cal patients relative to the number of people on it, which is a disadvantage to the genuinely needy who were intended to be the recipients of this safety net benefit.
But why do they say Medicare when it's Medicaid that seems to be the one that's expanding?
It is Medicaid that's expanding. Medicaid is the national name for what we call Medi-Cal in California. Medicare is the system for seniors. That's always underfunded also. The idea of Medicare for all, which also has been proposed, the nurses union proposed that in California, the Medicare for all, universal coverage at government expense, single provider insurance. The trouble with that is that it costs something like 3 times the current budget of California. And the other problem, of course, is that you're taking away the coverage that people have and giving them something that's going to be less than what they currently have. So just take one example. Unions have negotiated very good health benefits for their members. If we went to this Medicare for all model, this single provider of insurance, single payer, I think they call it, if we went to that, all those policies would be illegal. You would not be able to have your private health insurance that you went on strike to get. You would not be able to have it. It would be illegal. You would have the same coverage in California that someone who just walked over the border illegally could get, even though you were a citizen, tax-paying, went on strike to get those benefits, gave up salary to get those benefits. You would lose those benefits. So
someone who came across the border who would get Medicare.
Medi-Cal. The idea of Medicare for all is that there would be government single payer. That's what they really mean when they say Medicare for all, because Medicare is single payer for seniors. So you have the government programs, but it's actually you have a choice of many different insurance companies offering you Medicare coverage, which is confusing to people. What they want in California is what the nurses union wanted was this single payer. Everybody's on the same program. It's the same insurance for all. How could that possibly work? They would have to get permission from the federal government to take Medicare and fold it into single payer in California, which they might not get. There's a lot of obstacles. But the main thing is there will never be enough money to give everybody everything they want at everybody else's expense. That is never going to add up. And so it's a fantasy to say that we could have single payer and it would be better and less expensive. Of course, it would not be better. It would not be less expensive.
But Medicaid, or Medi-Cal as it is in California, so that is not single payer. That's just a last resort insurance payment coverage. Is that right? What is that?
Yes.
What's the difference?
Well, yes, it is single payer, but not for the whole population, only for the population that's on it, which is about a third of the state.
But that's a lot.
It certainly is for a
That's not what it
safety
was
net
designed
program.
for.
It's a lot for a safety net program. It's an unaffordable safety net. And all the politicians want to do is just keep expanding it. More benefits, more people on the benefits, more mandates, more promises, but the promises are not fulfilled.
And now they're running out of money for it, so they need to do this wealth tax, is what they
Exactly.
think. Would that need to be a ballot initiative?
Yes, it would.
That's what they filed, right?
That's what they filed.
Okay. Next story.
So we have the homeless industrial complex. Arrests this week. Bill Shaley in the U.S. Attorney's Office has indicted one gentleman for using fake bank statements to flip properties at a quick $16 million profit. He bought something for $11.2 million. He sold it quickly for $27.3 million, and he did it all with state and city funds. He's been indicted. And another one, separate case, spent $2 million of grant money on Beverly Hills luxury retailers. He's been indicted.
Someone took homeless money intended for the homelessness from taxpayers, and spent it on personal shopping.
Right.
In
This is
Beverly
Project
Hills.
Home Key
Amazing.
funds. Some people just have to have luxury goods, and if you wait till you can afford them, it's just so long and slow and too late, really. So people wonder, where's the money going for all
Here.
these homelessness taxes, all this money
Yes.
that's coming from the state, the federal government? Well, now we know. People are just ripping us off. At the Weingart Center Association, they're doing an internal review. They put 2 officials on leave. There are valuation questions about some of the properties they've been buying. Apparently, they bought a hotel in Torrance for $30 million, and they can't find anybody who thinks it's worth $30 million. One assessment said maybe it's worth 10. Then there was an appraisal that said maybe it's worth 20, but everybody agrees it's not worth 30. So we'll see what that's all about. This is now the home key money. You remember Project Room Key, which started during COVID, turned into Project Home Key, where they're going to turn hotels into apartments. And then now there's the Prop 1 money, which passed in the primary last year, March of 2024, and that's billions more for more of this. So they're also buying hotels with the Prop 1 money that's supposed to be for mental health care. And overall, it's just never really safe for the government to be throwing billions of dollars around in these public-private partnerships with NGOs. It doesn't seem like this is a model for anything except grift and graft.
It's unbelievable. Just go through that again. This was money that was supposed to be there for homeless. What? I can't follow the money here. What was supposed to happen?
Well, I think what was supposed to happen is there would be money from the state that would go to these NGOs, these non-governmental organizations, these nonprofits, where the salaries of the executives are quite high. And they would take this state money and they would buy hotel properties or old apartment buildings, refurbish them, and turn them into homeless housing. And lots of things happen between sending the money and opening the doors for business. And people just skim. I don't think there's any other way to look at it.
Because there's no financial controls on any of it.
Right. That they probably would say they're being paid for their wonderful services as developers, but it's an awful lot of money that people are making, and the problem is just getting worse.
But Bill Saley is now really digging into this.
Yes, and it's interesting to see because he is going to go after the people in government. He's going to go after the people who are in this non-governmental complex. He's not afraid to go after whoever is taking this money. It's really unfortunate, though, because everybody had the best intentions from the taxpayer side. You know, people have voted for tax increases for homelessness, housing, and services, especially in Los Angeles, over and over again. And what has happened as a result? The problem is really worse. In fact, there's a cabin community in the San Fernando Valley in a community called Tarzana. It was a 74 cabin community that opened in 2021 to great fanfare and political credit taking. And now it's going to be quietly closed. Why is it going to be quietly closed? Well, there's crime, there's drugs, there's a business right next door to it that actually had to get out of its lease early. It's been there for decades. The Red Barn Country Feed Store, Teresa's Country Feed and Pet Red Barn, I think is the full name. And earlier this year, they said, we have to get out of our lease. They were leasing the property from Metro, the transportation agency. And this cabin community is also on land owned by Metro. And guess what? SB 79 that the governor just signed enables Metro to build high-rise buildings for its own profit, for its own revenue, on its own land. So isn't it convenient that this cabin community had all this crime and drug activity around it to the point where it was a threat to the safety of the customers and employees of this business that was adjacent? The business asks Metro, or I think they said accepts Metro's offer to get out of its lease early. They're gone from that location. They have other locations, but they're gone from that one. And now they're going to close the cabin community. Problem solved, homelessness cured. And guess what? Metro can now use that land to build towers, residential or business or commercial. And, you know, it just looks like the homeless are being used for the purpose of manipulating land use in California.
The trouble is, I mean, I was going to say that's all, but I mean, of course, it's not all. There's endless examples of these kinds of stories because this is what you get with one party rule. It's a totally corrupt system. There's been no accountability. They assume there'll be never any consequences for their failures, their scams, their corruption. And so it just goes on, and no one's really shining a spotlight on it. When you are, and we are, and when I'm governor, I really will, because the central question exactly on all of these stories is what you were just saying, which is we have the highest taxes in the country, and they want to put them even higher. And what are we getting in return? The worst outcomes of any state. It is just completely unacceptable.
Well, yes. And, you know, the state really needs better leadership. So I'm glad you're running for governor.
There we go. We'll be fighting for that next year. Susan, great to see you as always. See you next time.
Thank you.
Joining us now, a fantastic fighter for common sense in California, Shannon Kessler, running for state assembly in Assembly District 30. Shannon, it's fantastic to see you. We've seen each other on the road many times, and I'm always so excited to see you. Your energy is great. You're exactly what we need to send to Sacramento to take on the swamp, and that is what you're planning to do. You're running for state assembly. Tell us all about that.
Yeah, that's correct. And thank you, Steve. I appreciate your energy as well. I think it's a very exciting time to be a Republican in California. My district is 30, and I'm running for state assembly. That covers the Central Coast, which, as you know, is just about the most beautiful part of California. It includes San Luis Obispo, it includes Monterey, and all the way in Big Sur in between. So what an honor and a blessing, but boy, it's a big district. I'm doing a good bit of driving. It takes 3 hours to go from the bottom to the top of this beautiful district. So it's going well, and I'm encouraged.
So tell us how you got into this. What brought you to this point?
Well, you also can relate to that story because I'm an advocate for girls' sports, and I founded an organization called Save Girls Sports Central Coast. There's several groups like this around the state, and in my area, we do have biological males in the girls' locker rooms, bathrooms, and sports. So I just knew in my heart that that was wrong, and I began speaking about it last March. My first speech was I'm Gen X and I have benefited from girls' sports. I was the first generation to do so. My mom's generation, they didn't really have girls' sports. I benefited from it. But look, my daughter's generation is losing girls' sports because now they allow males in. So my generation will have seen the beginning and the end of girls' sports. And I just wasn't going to stand for that. I'm a mama bear. I've always been involved in my school district. I've been a PTA president in the past. I've been a parent volunteer. I have, a group of people and we get together to discuss and get involved with our school board. That's just something that I've always done. And this issue, as you know, has risen to the top in California culture. And I believe that's because people instinctively know that it's wrong and, as Governor Newsom says, deeply unfair. So that was my launch pad, partly because they would say to me, when I spoke at CIF and I spoke at our school board, I even have called Dawn Addis's office multiple times. She's the current Democrat supermajority member who is our representative, and she has not returned my calls. I have formally requested a meeting with her and Save Girls Sports and the girls and the moms affected. And I've gotten the runaround. I've literally typed in all the details to get a formal appointment with her and have not gotten a response. I've gotten snarky replies from her staff.
So is this the first time you've run for political office?
No, I ran for city council in 2010 in my little town called Arroyo Grande. And it's just a beautiful little burg just east of Pismo Beach and Grover Beach. And I'm involved. I live right close to downtown, and I've served on the Parks and Recreation Commission here. I'm a frequent speaker at city council, school board, and at our county supervisors meetings, sometimes even up to the state. And even at CIF, I've gone to their meetings. So I'm not new to public policy. And I also have a public policy certificate from Pepperdine University. I took a specific course in local government and in civic involvement. So that's something that sets me up well, I believe. I take advantage as a citizen, as we have the right to do in our constitutional representative republic, to speak my mind to our elected representatives.
And the thing that really it was interesting that I hadn't quite appreciated because we've seen each other a few times, but you pointed out at on one of those occasions, when I talk about this issue of biological boys and girls sports, and it's not just sports. I mean, it's the locker rooms and it's just spaces. It's the whole thing, and it all goes back to AB 1266, which was passed by the legislature in 2013. So we've been living with this a long time now, this insanity. But there's a particular story that caught my eye, and as you pointed out, that happened in where you are, and I've been telling this story on the road up and down California because to me it's almost more egregious. Of course, it's all terrible, and the sports aspect is terrible, the way that girls' hard work and aspirations and ambitions are sort of crushed in the way that we've seen. And people like, on the national level, Riley Gaines and others have, told that story so powerfully, the emotional impact of that. But this one was so outrageous. It was the locker room story, and it was actually you and where you are. So can you tell us that story and remind us what it is?
Yes, it was my friend's daughter who is one of 1,900 students, so that would be approximately 800 girls at Arroyo Grande High School in Southern Lucia Mar, which is our school district. So she went into the locker room to change for track and field, and a boy was in there. So a biological male, he's trans identifying, but she's known him, and this isn't just about him. I want to make that clear. There are a few trans identifying students in the school, and I'm not saying they don't have a right to be in the school. Absolutely not. But when they have boy parts, they should not be in the girls' locker room. So there are a few boys, and one happened to be in there that day, and so she turned around and ran out to the coach and said, "Coach, there's a boy in the locker room." And they're like, "Oh my gosh, who was it?" They're reacting, initially until they find out who it is. And then when they find out who it is, then she's the one with a problem. She's the one that has to change. So she did complain. Her mom complained. They've gone through the process, and you basically get the runaround in modern schools. And again, to clarify, she was saying there's a boy and there's two other girls that are saying this. We know this is happening. And it's not specifically about one individual. I want to make that clear, but it's about the policy. So they went to the state. I mean, they filed a complaint. For Save Girls Sports, filed a complaint. I was already an activist, a parental rights activist. That is part of my persona. And this was something I was already speaking on. So this young lady, her story, her video that was actually recorded in the meeting when she spoke to school board went even more viral, because while she's telling the story, she starts crying, just kind of remembering the experience. And I believe that her tears were more for not feeling defended by the adults in the situation, by the adults in the school, and even the school board. So she starts crying when she's telling the story, and our school board president literally pounded her gavel and said, "Wrap it up, sweetie." And this was after shortening her comments, the girls, to 1 minute from 3 minutes. Our school board puts public comment all the way at the end. So we're sitting there until 10 p.m. sometimes. They won't do public comment in the beginning like most boards. I Googled it. 97% of boards in California do public comment in the beginning. No, I believe they're putting a pain is in the process to us and trying to make us wear out. And it will happen. Parents will come and they'll complain about this issue to the school board members, asking them to change the policy, not discriminating against any individuals. None of us have asked for them to be removed, but we're being accused of this, of course. But it was most egregious because the young lady definitely has encountered a boy in the locker room. What they have told her is, if you're not comfortable changing with a biological male in there, you can go behind that curtain, that little flimsy curtain over there, or you can change in the coach's office, which is glass. And then my other friend's daughter is the one whose video went viral. She changes in her car. So this other girl decides to not even go in the locker room. And she goes to her car, makes sure no one's going around, and quickly changes her clothes in a car in the parking lot. Girls should not be in this position, and I'm not going to stand for it. I was already speaking for parents and for girls and women's rights, and this is something we have to end.
Very powerful. I hadn't heard the details there about changing in the car. Wow. I want to go back to the school board meeting, the cruelty of that. And you've got someone doing a very difficult thing, describing in public a teenager, right? She's not like a professional speaker who's been in the public eye. She's doing something really difficult, and she's crying. And this, I mean, I'm going to use a rude word, but like this monstrous bureaucrat just banging the gavel. was so despicable to me. I think I'm right in remembering that when she's describing what was happening in the locker room, and she used this gesture, I remember, when she was telling the story, and she was describing this biological male in the locker room and saying, I think she said the word intact and completely intact, and sort of made this gesture with her hands. She didn't want to be specific because it's awkward. And
Well, I do want to clarify, Steve, that in the interest of clarity, I do know the people involved in the situation, and this student was not without his clothes on. So we've asked enough of the girls. So that story, the intact, I think that Riley Gaines has used that term before because it is true, and that's kind of refers to what we definitely don't want to see in the girls' locker room. But in this scenario, it also gets a little more interesting because the problem is that biological boys who have not been altered are in the locker room based on simply them saying that now I identify as a girl. So the girls are expected to cope with this. That's what's unfair. I don't want to discriminate, or harm these young people. So here's a perfect example of what could happen. There was a trans identifying male in my daughter's, when my daughter was going there, she's a little older, and he would change in a private locking bathroom. And California law requires each school to have at least one gender neutral locking bathroom. And this school has one or more. And the trans identifying individuals, those boys, they could be using that. I'm not saying they can't identify as trans in school. I'm just saying that their biologically male bodies should not be in the girls' locker room. That's all we're asking for. But you're correct. State law allows it. That's the harm. And they would say to me at the school board, all I brought was the resolution, the same resolution that Sonia Shaw has brought. We modified it so that the verbiage matches our school, and we've submitted it 4 times. 4 times. And they have refused to put it on the agenda each time. And in fact, they publicly voted not to put it on the agenda. So we do have 2 conservative board members who defend the girls. The other 5 will not stand up for the girls, even by signing a resolution letting the state know that they're unhappy with this policy. I appreciate the fact that you bring up AB 1266 because that was when it started. And I knew when this came down, I was aware of that at the time. And I warned my daughter, talked to her, here's what you're going to do if a boy comes in your locker room, because the state law allows it. So they say at school board, we have to follow state law. And I go, well, how about I go to the state and I change that law? Because we don't have enough Republicans to do that. So if we can get more Republicans elected like me, we can change these egregious policies. Like if we can get a governor elected like you, we can change these woeful, abusive tactics.
disgusting. It's obscene. I mean, I can't. Like the way I put, and I talk about it every speech, because it's such a egregious example of the insanity, the absurdity. As Riley uses that term, it's absurd. And how have we put up with it for so long? 12 years now. It's just obviously crazy, and I completely appreciate and agree with how you're talking about it, which is this is absolutely not in any way anti-trans, anti anybody expressing who they are and how they want to be treated in the way that they want, but not at the expense of everybody else. I want to ask about just because you really are deep in this issue. So, is the policy such that operates in this school or other schools not just using the locker room? I mean, for example, and thank you for clarifying what happened in this situation, but is there a scenario where there's a biological male showering in the girls' locker room?
I believe that the law would allow for that. I have not heard of that actually happening in this school. What's interesting is that what the girls will say is that throughout the day they'll text each other, hey, there's one in the bathroom by the library. Like they literally will kind of let each other know where the boys who identify as girls are using the girls' bathroom or are in the locker room. And then, of course, when they're in sports, and that is also happening in our district with boys competing in girls' sports. And what's happening to me is I'm getting personally attacked and accused of targeting one individual. And there's more than one. And that's what I knew was going to happen. The problem is the policy that allows a biological male and tries to tell the girls and me and their parents, that we're the ones who were wrong, that we can't stand for this anymore. The law is bad. It's part of the Democrat supermajority's woke ideology, and it just is continuing because people aren't, have just not experienced it. This is why I'm telling the story. I'm not telling the story to highlight any particular person. I'm telling the story because what I would get faced with when I would speak on this is, well, that's not really happening, is it? And like you said, it really is happening. So these girls, their videos have gone viral. They're on my social media, Kessler4CA, and they're Kessler4CA on Instagram, and they're on my YouTube, Kessler on YouTube, and they've gone viral. Both these girls were from Save Girls Sports. They were interviewed on Fox News, and their stories went crazy. The reason they went crazy is because people react to it like when you speak. They go, this is egregious. We shouldn't put our girls through this. The wrong is the adults.
And again, so interesting and helpful to have that detail of the girls. They shouldn't be thinking about this stuff at school, like protecting themselves from these situations. And just for their own sense of well-being. It's ridiculous. I can't believe it. I completely agree with you. It's so ridiculous. Just to be clear, some people if you watch this show on YouTube or wherever, I have this pink wristband which I proudly wear. There it is, Save Girls Sports. I received that when I went to the CIF championships, and I'm not taking it off until we overturn this outrageous law. And we need you there. So Shannon, thank you very, very much for being here, for fighting. So you just mentioned it again, but just tell everyone where they can support you. Remember, you can support Shannon wherever you live. She's the kind of fighter we need. So tell everyone how they can get involved.
Yes, I appreciate financial contributions and volunteers from afar, near and far. So Kessler4CA, that's KESSLERFORCA.com is my website. Please follow, like, share, comment on my social media. It's prominent on Instagram, Facebook, and X. And I would love to help make California golden as it once used to be. Let's do this, Steve.
Exactly. I love it. Thank you, Shannon. Wonderful to see you today. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, that is our show for today. Hope you enjoyed it. Make sure you follow us on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. If you want to get involved in our campaign, please do that. Now is the time. Sign up to be a volunteer. We're building our army that we're going to use to take back California. Steve Hilton for governor.com. Get involved, and I'll see you out there on the campaign trail.